Hi, my name is QHanson, and today I will be talking through my reduced sodium intake project measure phase. The agenda for us today will be to review the project charter, to discuss the measure phase deliverables, to review the baseline data that was collected, to go through conclusions and analysis options, and to discuss next steps. Here is the project charter, and it is to remind you of my current problem statement, which is over the last 3 to 4 years I have been identified as a risk of having high blood pressure or hypertension. My goal was to reduce my dietary sodium intake by 25% on a weekly basis to help alleviate some of that hypertension. A couple of the metrics that I was looking to measure within this project was my dietary sodium intake and my blood pressure. The team members' scope, boundaries, and potential problems remain unchanged, and some of the next steps within the project here after the measure phase is going to be completing a baseline data analysis, defining the improvement opportunities, and implementing improvements and tracking against them. Some of the main deliverables for the measure phase included collecting at least 3 weeks of baseline data at consistent intervals, measuring at least 2 quantitative parameters, utilizing at least 2 basic quality tools to present the data, and then defining potential data analysis options. For my baseline data, I looked at collecting my dietary sodium intake over 4 weeks, and some of the parameters that I recorded were day of the week, the date, the meal type, the food item, whether it was self-prepared or restaurant purchased, and the sodium amount. For blood pressure, I collected that data weekly for 4 weeks, and I recorded systolic and diastolic pressure. As a reminder of how I collected the dietary sodium intake levels, I have the process flow outlined here, indicating that I would wake up, eat breakfast, record my sodium intake in MyFitnessPal based on what I ate, and then followed through with that, doing it at lunch and at dinner, and then finishing out the day with recording them into a spreadsheet. This next graph shows my weekly dietary sodium intake levels over the 4 weeks that I collected my data. For weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of my sodium intake levels were between 23,000 and approximately 26,000 milligrams. As you can see by the red line and orange line, the red line is going to indicate the weekly recommended sodium intake levels as calculated by the daily dietary guidelines for Americans. So that's built off of 2,300 milligrams per day. And then the orange line is going to indicate what my average weekly sodium intake levels need to be if I wanted to achieve that 25% reduction. And that number is, on average, 18,500 milligrams. As I mentioned earlier, I collected a lot of this data and indicated what types of food I was eating. I then constructed this Pareto chart to give myself an understanding of which foods were contributing the most to my sodium intakes on a daily basis. So this is a total of all of the sodium that was consumed throughout the 4-week period by that food type. So as you can see here, turkey sandwich is what I eat for lunch a lot during the day, and that is the highest contributor, so that will be something to look into as I move forward and look to reduce the sodium levels. Here it shows my baseline data for my blood pressure. My systolic and diastolic blood pressures are charted on control charts here. For systolic, my upper and lower control limits are based on pre-hypertension ranges, and I fell within that range for all 4 weeks. And for diastolic, my upper and lower control limits again were based on pre-hypertension ranges, and I was within that range all 4 weeks as well. Some of the conclusions that were drawn from the baseline data that I collected indicates that my current sodium levels are quite a bit higher than what is recommended, and with that I can look for different trends and correlations in days of the week, the meals that I'm eating, whether it's happening more in breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and the different types of food types. I also was showing that my blood pressure readings reside within those pre-hypertension ranges, and so I'd like to determine if there's any correlation to higher weeks of sodium consumption and those blood pressure readings. And then I've also shown that foods that I consume the most often are going to be the biggest factors, and so I'd like to really identify those highest risk foods and determine if there are some different practices that I can use to reduce the amount of sodium on a daily basis. Some of the next steps within the project: in the measure phase, we'll be completing the peer evaluation on the oral presentations and the written report. For the analyze and improve phase, I'm going to analyze the data, implement my improvement plan, complete my oral presentation and the evaluations along with the written report, and then finish out with the final presentation, final evaluations, and my final written report. Thank you.